And he said his name is Peel Grapes. They got grapes. Every Yeah.
But that's
And Shad was a monster.
finishing up that process and all of that, whatever that was.
Oh, gosh. That was crazy.
Should we get started? Has everyone read the minutes?
Yes, somewhere, I make a motion to accept the minutes from January 12, 2021.
I second it.
Motion and a second to accept the minutes, all in favor? Yes.
Was that for both minutes or just the one? Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes for the whatever. January 20th? Yeah, whatever that's called, whatever that. And a special meeting for, January 2021.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Passes.
Am I 3 or 2? I think I'm 3.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I don't think it matters. If you want to be number one, you can be number
No, I
one.
don't want to be.
Don't give him that big of a.
We have to sign in.
Oh,
You told me I had to do that.
In case we get robbed.
That's what I'm thinking.
everyone look at
Bills.
their bills?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. Motion on bills?
Yeah, we need a motion on the bills.
I'll make a motion to accept the bills for
Okay.
January 2021.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor? Passes.
Yay. We can do it.
Now, the next one is adopt the ordinance of 2021-1, the amendment to the appropriation ordinance action. That is, paper and all that.
Would you like me to read the title?
Yeah, read the title.
Ordinance number 2021-01, an ordinance of the City of Juliaetta, Idaho, amending ordinance 2020-02, the appropriation ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2020 and ending September 30, 2021, appropriating additional monies that have been received by the city of Juliaetta, Idaho, and budget reallocations in the sum of $203,734, and providing an effective date.
Wendy, this was the one that, for the
We had
the
the
grant money that
public-
came in, and we had to do that, right?
This was for our public hearing that we had
Yeah.
last week.
Do we have a motion?
We have to move that the rules be suspended. Number 3 on your little thing there,
Oh, my little third one?
on your extra sheet that I gave you.
This one here. After a motion to rule in the suspension of the appropriate ordinance past the first reading of the title only.
I can barely hear, so you just make it one that we're just doing it by title only, right? I'll
Yeah.
make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Passes. We ask for a motion to adopt the ordinance.
I move that we accept the ordinance 2021-01.
I'll second.
Okay, we have Vicky. Yes or no?
Yes.
It's a roll call vote. Yes.
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 Passes. All right, Tony, I guess it's up to you to give us the good news or the bad news.
The audit news. Yeah. Oh, I appreciate it. My name's Tony Matson. I'm with Hayden Ross out of Moscow. We're just coming down to give a presentation of the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2020 audit. A couple different packages in front of you. Before we dive into those, I have some required communication that I just want to go through with you. First is what we call the ending governance letter. I'm going to get this over to Bond for the record. It's required communication. It basically says that here are some upcoming county standards that are coming down the pipeline. It talks about significant estimates that are in your financial statements, which really come down to your capital asset and useful life related to your capital assets. And it goes through and says that we didn't have any disagreements with management. So I do want to take a moment and tell Bonnie and Lindy thank you for all their work. Really easy to work with, put up with all of our requests, and we get through the audit, so I appreciate that. The other thing that I have is this is what's called the audit finding letter. So there's a couple audit findings that we have in the financial statements that I just want to go through with the board or with council. The first is, and these are both in the back of your financial statements, but we can just talk through them. So the first is related to the financial close and reporting. This is a finding that the city has had on the financial statements for a number of years here. And effectively, it started out as, for the most part, the city runs on a cash basis. Okay, so money in, money out. When it comes time for the audit, at the end of the year, you're required to report on an accrual basis. So you got to figure out what are my receivables, what are my payables, and get those all booked into the financial statements. We've always helped out with that process. It is the responsibility of the city to do. So by the nature of us coming in and assisting through that whole process, effectively we are helping through that closing process. That is something that the city is responsible to do. So that finding is on there. It's been on there for a number of years. This year I wanted to just highlight it a little bit more. Bonnie has a new role. We spent a lot of time this last year. We came down. She's been doing great. The accounting of the city has sort of changed over the last couple of years in terms of it's getting a little bit more complex, and we're talking about you have a lot more grants going on. You have a bond levy that's coming down the pipeline. USDA money, you have federal money coming in, you have all these grants, and all of those require a certain level of, it's just, if we can get them off on the right foot, it's just gonna make the accounting so much easier for the city. So we, this last year, kind of working through the FY2021 grant, the water line grant, the sewer grant, we just ended up making a number of adjustments, just getting all the revenues into the right buckets, the expenses into the right buckets, the capital assets into the right buckets. And that ended up taking quite a bit of time. So my point to bringing this all up is that there is, with the levy, the bond, all the grant money that's coming down the pipeline, I think it's going to be extremely important over the next few years that the city make sure that we kind of get the accounting figured out on day one, so that as the money's coming in and the reimbursement requests are going out and all of that, that the accounting is following it along, so that when you guys are looking at the bills every single month, you guys are getting a clear picture of where that's at. It's sort of beyond the, well, at the end of the year, we'll shore up the books for the audit. I think that it needs to be something that the city starts working on a monthly basis, and just make sure, especially when you start talking about federal dollars. That was one of the things that ended up coming in this year in the audit, was that you guys had a single audit for the first time in recent memory at least. So what is a single audit? It's when the entity has over $750,000 of federal grants, federal expenditures. The government requires me to come in and do it. It's not a financial audit, it's a compliance audit. So we come in and we look at, okay, you got this grant money from the USDA, what are the grant requirements? And they kind of fall into these different buckets. We come in and test a certain number of those buckets to make sure it's not so much that the expenditures are right, it's that was there controls in place to provide reasonable assurance that this compliance requirement was handled correctly. Okay? So it's really about the internal controls surrounding the grant money as much as it is around the grant money being spent right. So it's sort of beyond, like, those are the qualifying expenditures, here's my reimbursement, we should be good. Well, it's more complicated than that. One of the things that when we came into the single audit this year, one of the first questions that you ask is, do you have a written procurement policy? So do you have a policy that's written related to your federal awards about how you're going to go out and secure your bids and select your vendors for your projects? The city has done all the right federal procurement policies and procedures. You don't have a written policy. So when it comes to your federal awards, it is not best practices is to have a written procurement policy. It's not you should, it's a you must. So there's no wiggle room on that. Now, again, did all the procurement policies and procedures follow what you're required to do? Yes, they did. But we get stuck on the point that's like, we do need a written procurement policy. And it doesn't have to be for all of your expenditures, it's really related to federal awards. So when we're spending federal dollars, then they just require that you guys follow a certain policy. So I've sent Bonnie and Lindy sort of a sample of one. There is some language in there. There's a checklist. It is sort of a check the box type thing. As the city moves forward, I expect that there will be a single audit in fiscal year 21. There's probably going to fiscal year 22, maybe 23, as you guys work through all these projects that you have and the way that you guys have organized the grants. So this isn't going away. And I'm encouraging you guys to go ahead and get a written procurement policy over this year. It's officially, I did not write it up as a, like, this is in your financial statements. It's sort of like, here's a control deficiency that I'm bringing to your attention. If we get to next year and there isn't a written procurement policy, I don't really have a choice other than to put it in as a single audit finding. So that's kind of where we are with that. I don't know if you guys have any questions for procurement, or if you'd rather talk about it at a different time. I'm available, is effectively what I want to say on that. So that's where you are with that. So now we got through all that stuff, let's get to the numbers, which is way more fun than talking about internal control. So you have the two packages in front of you. Before we open up the graphs, if you just turn to that first tab, this is the statement and net position. So when you look at the financial statements, you really see the city in two different ways. You have what we call the statement and net position, which is looking at the city as if it is a private enterprise. So what you're going to see here is you're going to see all of your capital assets capitalized and then depreciated over their useful lives. You're going to see all of your long-term debt here. In your fund financial statements, which is how you guys budget, which is how the state lets you guys budget, how you guys run everything. If you guys are buying capital assets, it's just an expense. Okay, when you're making your debt payment, it's just an expense. That's fund financial statements. These are going to be your statement and net positions, but they're going to be more on a private enterprise basis. So I don't want to talk about it for very long because you guys don't see your financial statements that way. But on the first graph, I just wanted to talk through a couple of key numbers here. Number one is your total equity in the city at the end of September was $3,287,000. So that's sort of the total equity. That's going to be, I'm trying a new graph, so we'll see how it goes, but you kind of have these 5 different columns. But your equity, $3.2 million, is really broken up into some different categories. One is net investment in capital assets. So of your total equity, you guys have $2.3 million of your equity is just in your infrastructure. So not available really to pay bills or anything. That's just how much equity you guys have in your infrastructure itself. Another part of that is you have, on that next column over where it says restricted, you have $132,000 of restricted cash. That's basically to cover all of your bond debt requirements. Say you shall have money in a reserve to pay future bond payments. You got $132,000 set aside for that. Which really leaves that the city has about $855,000 of unrestricted equity, which means it's available for general use. During last year, you also paid off about $40,000 of your existing bonds. You have about $544 million of bond debt still to go. And the last piece that I want to talk about before we switch over to your actual regular financial statements is your net pension liability. So, talked about this in the past. Net pension liability is a reflection of how well Percy is doing. So, Percy, being the retirement system for Idaho, if they are underfunded, there is a theoretical liability that falls to the city. That says, hey, it's not Percy's liability. It's really Percy's just the entity that's holding all of the contributions that you've given to them and pays out all the people who are then retired. Percy is 88% funded last year, which is a great percent funded. They were 93%. You know, it's been sort of a crazy year in the stock market. It does not surprise me that the funding went down. 88% is still considered a well-funded plan. Anything over 80%. So Idaho still remains one of the best funded retirement systems in the United States. With that said, it's 88% funded. If they were to come and say, hey, we want to be 100% funded, that liability for the city would amount to about $76,000. So that's what 12% underfunded means for the city. Okay? All right, let's get on to the general fund. So we have a couple different funds we're going to go through. We're going to go to the general fund today. We're going to go to the water, the sewer, and the sanitation. And I'll try to keep everybody entertained along the way. So general fund had an ending fund balance of $1,016,000. So that's basically the equity that's sitting in the general fund. That was an increase this last year of about $66,000. I've also shown on this graph here, and you guys don't have the benefit of the graphs, but there's a recommendation from the GFOA, which is sort of the governmental association for the United States. It says, as a minimum fund balance, a governmental entity should have at least 2 months worth of operating expenditures and then fluctuate from there based on the individual needs of the entity. So I went ahead and shown what that number is, which represents about $32,000. That's effectively 2 months worth of operating expenses for the city. You guys are sitting at $1,016,000. Large fund balance carryover, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we kind of move down through the graphs. But you effectively have 62 months worth of expenditures sitting in your fund balance. Very well, you're in a great spot. If we look at the next graph, again, it kind of goes through the history of your revenues and expenditures. Again, this last year, general fund had an increase of about $66,000. Here's about an increase in your fund balance each and every, in 9 of the last 10 years. The only year it didn't happen was in 2018, when you guys did about $70,000 worth of street repairs. So other than that, 10 of the last 10 years, there's been an increase in your fund balance. You guys have been stable. Your expenditures, in 2011, your total general fund expenditures were $184,000. In 2020, they were $194,000. So you've managed to keep your expenditures fairly consistent and low over the last 10 years. Look at your revenues a little bit closer. Again, your total revenues last year were $261,000. That was an increase of about $6,000 year over year, or about 2% more in fiscal year 20 than 2019. All things considered, it looked to be fairly consistent in terms of your tax revenue was about the same, your interest revenue was about the same, your other revenue was about the same. You received a little bit more revenue sharing from the state, and that's really why you guys ended up with about $6,000 more revenue in the state. On the expense side, your total expenses last year were $194,000. That was actually down $3,000 year over year. And we kind of alluded to that. Your expenditures have been real consistent. In terms of your split out, everything seems real similar to how it was last year. Had about $70,000 of general expenses, $14,000 you guys spent on the parks last year, $58,000 you spent on the streets. Your capital outlay, which is just sort of capital type items, was about $18,000. The big one in there was playground equipment. Your safety, public safety expenses were about $33,000, and about $1,500 on the library. That looks real similar to your breakout in prior years. So before we move on to water, sewer, and sanitation, just wanted to kind of summarize and say general fund is in good shape. You guys have a large carryover balance, which I am going to talk about a little bit as we move into the other fund, but sitting in great shape. All right, so I want to talk about the water fund. So again, your water fund is what we call an enterprise fund. So the books are kept as if it's a private enterprise. So in your water fund, you're always going to see, if you have got capital assets, you're going to see those capitalized, and then you're going to have depreciation expense in your financial statement. So as you buy capital assets, rather than be shown up as expenses, they show up as an asset. So you see this last year, your net position actually went, in your water fund, went from $1,179,000 up to $1,964,000. An increase in your net position of about $785,000. The reason why that happened is the FY project and the water line, both capital assets. You guys spent about $877,000 on those upgrades last year. That ends up looking like an increase in your equity, even though it's not cash in there. What I would like to say about that, so you have the $1,964,000 of equity. Of that, $1,953,000 of it is infrastructure. So we're talking about almost all of that looks like infrastructure equity. Additionally, in the water fund, you have your debt service restrictions, so $132,000 of that is restricted cash that you can't spend other than on debt service expenditures. Which leaves an unrestricted balance, which is really like what you have available for operating expenses moving forward at a negative $121,000. So, although the water fund, looking at $1.9 million of equity, you're actually, the cash that you guys have available is about negative $121,000, which really means that fund balance that we're talking about in the general fund is supporting, in terms of like they've loaned some cash to the water fund in order for the water fund to continue paying for its operations. Okay? At the end of the year, the water fund has a payable to the general fund of $198,000. So when you look at it and say, oh, it looks like the water fund, we have plenty of equity, all your equity is in your infrastructure, so you're actually operating with limited cash in your sewer fund right now. Okay? Or sorry, water fund, thank you. If we look at your working capital analysis, so all things being equal, your expenses are also going to include some depreciation, which is really, you don't pay money out for depreciation, it's just an accounting entry. So on a cash flow wise, we always like to look at the fund and say, okay, cash flow wise, let's make sure we have how much assets, current assets we have, less the liabilities, current liabilities we owe, we call that working capital. How much working capital should we have so that we can kind of capture and pay for our bills? Our recommendation is to have 1.5 months worth of expenses, which equates to about $28,000 of working capital. This year, the first time that equation is flipped. So last year you had $47,000 of working capital. This year, you ended up with negative $7,000 worth of working capital, which means that your current assets, your available liquid assets, are not sufficient to pay all of your current liabilities. Now, the kicker there is $198,000 of that is what you owe to the general fund, so there's not necessarily a payment required, which is why you're being able to cover cash flow and continue working on that, on what your actual expenditures are in the water fund. So, and we'll go to the sewer fund. The sewer fund looks similar to this. Some of the ways that it's like, okay, well, that's great, Tony, but what are we gonna do? The allocation of your expenses, so payroll, different other expenses that's coming into the city, you're allocating that to the different funds, right? Well, some of that's payroll. We have payroll, and we got some of it while we're doing general fund activities, some of it's related to sewer, some of it's water, some of it's sanitation. That cost, I think it's probably worth looking at that allocation to make sure that the allocation is matching that's been historically allocated to all the funds. Is it still represent what's happening? Because it's very possible that there are more expenses just being allocated in terms of payroll and other costs that really could be allocated to the general fund that are in the sewer fund, and with a sort of re-looking at that equation on how things can be split out, does that help the situation? So, something to think about as you move.
Isn't that like with the budget and then?
So yeah, to kind of like move into this year, one of the things, the budget amendment, I believe tonight also had like, okay, well, did a transfer, like an actual official transfer, correct? That said, okay, we're going to transfer extra general fund money we have, we're gonna make a transfer, a contribution to the water fund.
And the sewer.
Water and the sewer, so that we're gonna make those budgets whole for fiscal year 21. So with the revenue that you expect, plus the transfer from the general fund, you now have revenues that are equal to the expenses that you guys have budgeted. In the past, the revenues have always been less than the expenditures budgeted, and that's just sort of slowly why the fund has slowly got a smaller and smaller actual available cash. So that has been budgeted so that fiscal year 21, you have like a revenue, sort of a neutral budget. Your revenues and expenses are going to be. Okay? All right. Moving on, there's this water fund revenue and expense graph. I'm actually going to skip over that. We're going to move over to the sewer fund here. So, sewer fund, similar situation. The net position is negative $99,000. Okay. However, since 2017, it was at a negative 192. You guys did some rate changes. You started to see the effect of those rate changes, bringing up that negative net position back, and that you're getting some positive momentum in terms of the net position and the income that's coming in. And you're sort of covering some of those prior losses in the sewer fund. Your capital assets here represent about $87,000, and your unrestricted, so again, that sort of like balance that you have available for the next year is a negative $186,000. It is getting better. Overall, the total amount borrowed at this point is $224,000 from the general fund. Now, just going to go on the budget amendment. As that transfer officially happens, it will eat into that amount that you're saying that, hey, we currently owe this. You've just approved the transfer, so now the transfer is going to go in. The amount that you owe is effectively going to go down in fiscal year 21. If you look at, again, so we're talking about working capital for the sewer fund. 1.5 months worth of expenditures is roughly $11,500. That's where we want to see the working capital be. Your working capital is at a negative $165,000. Again, it's your current assets minus current expenses are not sufficient, or your current assets are not sufficient to cover your current expenditures. With the kicker being $224,000 is that sort of an inner fund balance that you guys have that isn't actually needed to be paid back. Okay. Look at your sewer fund again. Revenues versus expenses. From 2011 to 2017, there was a loss each and every year in terms of your total revenues were less than your expenditures. As you made some rate changes, starting in 2018, you've seen 18, 19, and now again 20. Your revenues have been greater than your expenditures, and you're sort of working off that deficit balance. Sanitation fund. Net position ended the year at $173,000, an increase of about $15,000 this year. Again, you got no capital assets, so all of that money is restricted, unrestricted. $173,000 is available for expenditures into the next year. Your working capital requirements, again, 1.5 months worth of expenditures is $9,700. You're sitting at the 173. You got plenty of funds in your sanitation to cover the expenses. So overall, I mean, this isn't sort of highlighted this year, but this isn't new news. It's sort of been there. Overall, when we look at your revenues and expenses from all of your funds, it looks about a net zero, right? Like all of the revenues that you're charging from your different sources are effectively just covering all the expenses that you guys have in all your different funds. It's just that like an independent funds have some different variances in it that I think they've been working on in fiscal year 21 budget, and I just wanted to spend a little bit of time just talking through that, make sure that it's had that conversation again and just kind of talk through it. So, overall, like I said, general fund's in great shape. For me, the big thing is making sure that, the funds will fix themselves with a little bit of work. As you move forward with all the new grants and everything, I think from my perspective, the big thing is to make sure that Bonnie and Wendy have a good sense of what's happening with all the new grant funds, make sure those get started off on the right foot, and really make sure that we're coming in, and the end of the year is not the time to get them reconciled out. It's going to be month by month and getting them started off on the right foot. So, questions for me?
So your recommendation, once we started getting all these federal grants, I know they're great that they're paying,
Yeah.
is to have Bonnie kind of work with you folks just to make sure we're starting off right and not wait till the end of the year to make it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so we came in this year, and Wendy has a set of spreadsheets that she keeps that's like very detailed in terms of like, well, we got this money in, this is our reimbursement, this coming back. Like, that information's there. Bonnie's paying the bills, her reimbursements are coming in, and it's just really, and I don't know if coordination is the right word, but it's just making sure that dialogue is back and forth in terms of like, okay, let's make sure we got like, what are the vendors for this project, and where are those projects going to be coded, and when is that reimbursement supposed to be coming in? When am I looking at it? So that they're both 100% engaged in what's happening. So as the money comes in, it's not just, well, I got money, I'm going to put it over here because I'm not sure exactly what that's for. Just having that dialogue and make sure we know where that's at, that Bonnie's aware. It's like, hey, we've sent off that reimbursement, so she's, hey, this money's coming in, I'm looking for it. What expense code are we going to use to code all of the water fund expenses? How is that going to work? And just sort of set up the framework so when it starts, the activity is all happening, it's not, well, what did I do last month? It's, okay, I know what I'm going to do because it's right here. I have my cheat sheet, or whatever it is. And then if you're looking at it at the end of the month and say, okay, what do I think should have happened? I should have had these, I know I paid these bills. Do I have, does it look like it's the right dollar amount? Do I have my revenue? If I don't have any revenue, why is that? Oh, it's because the reimbursement hasn't come in. Just kind of taking that moment and monitoring your financial activity to make sure it still makes sense to what you believe should have happened last month, or what you're aware of is happening. So make sure it's on, you kind of got your cheat sheet on where it's going to be consistently coded. Make sure you're reconciling at the end of every month to make sure it's there. And if you guys need my help on that, I'm in. I think that Wendy and Bonnie also are fully capable of making sure that happens. It's just being dedicated and making the time. We're all busy. There's always this thing, so like, okay, what is that? It's grant reconciliation. You just want to roll your eyes back in your head. But it's part of the process. So, and it's important. You guys got CETA's helping you with some stuff. You got different people that are there to help. I'm one of those resources.
And then my second question is this written procurement policy.
Yep.
How, it sounds like we probably need to get that going fairly, get the stamp, you have us prove it here probably pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would.
We have the sample, we just have to go through it. We kind of haven't had time this, with the end of the year stuff. So we're hoping by next month we can at least show it to you guys, and you guys can have time to read it, and then the following month maybe approve it, however. So we have it on the books.
And the big thing about the procurement policy is really the federal government's after. It's like, okay, we have what we call micro purchases. So if you're going to buy things under $3,500, then okay, then you can go do that. If it's between $3,500 and like $50,000, it's like, okay, well, let's make sure that you guys go out and get a couple bids and go through the process. If it's over $50,000, then it's like, okay, we need an RFP, we got to make sure that we got sealed bids. Like, there are just some things that the government intending to make sure that there's equal opportunity for vendors to come in and bid on that, and it's not, that process is happening. So,
Even
it's,
the engineer, excuse me,
Yeah.
the engineers in our folder of all the information that they're giving us, there's a procurement for them, but we need our own. We follow their rules because they help us follow those rules, but we just still need one.
So, like the fines, and we can probably do it this next month and then approve it.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, and I mean, in a lot of cases, a lot of these vendors have already selected for things, and obviously I haven't audited what happened in this year, but you got resources that are going out and making sure all the procurement's happening. It's just crossing that T and dotting that I, and like, oh yeah, we have our written procurement policy, which is what I have to come in and look at and say, do you have it, so.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that's 45 minutes, you guys are never getting back.
We've been seeing them.
All right,
Thank you.
any other questions? Okay, well, you guys have a good evening, and we'll get in touch,
Yes, definitely.
okay?
I need all the help I can get.
If anybody has any questions for me, I'm always available, so feel free to give me a call. Okay?
Thanks. Yeah, because I'm not sure what Stillman and Dodd's still gonna need, so, for the
Okay.
grant stuff.
All right, well,
If it's anything you can help me with, I'll keep it in that.
all right, sounds good. All right, have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Now we have Chuck Hammond request for the council approval of de-annexation of the 1.21 acres parcel or inside the city limits. Part of the large parcel outside the city limits, but within the city area of impact.
So I gave everyone a copy of the letter that Chuck and Dolly wrote. And then you have the legal description, and you received the maps before that. So, and I also, I think, emailed to you our city attorney's instructions on what needed to be done in order to approve this. They needed a written request, which we have, the change that they're seeking in detail with maps, which they've given. Let's see. They prepared the legal description and the map, like I said. So I guess at this point, as long as everything looks okay to the council, then you can go ahead and approve or deny. And then I also had Ken write up the ordinance in case you were ready to adopt that tonight, but it's not necessary. If you can take until next month if you wish.
I move to approve the de-annexation of his 1.21 acre parcel.
We have a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the parcel. All in favor? Passes.
just confirming this 2021-02 is just basically saying that we're okay with the city basically doing its boundaries because we just
Yeah, it's the ordinance that changes our boundaries.
got her, okay.
Do we need a motion to suspend the rules?
I'll make that motion to suspend the rules and this is just read the title or we need to do that.
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Passes.
Okay. Ordinance number 2021-02, an ordinance of the City of Juliaetta, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, making findings and declarations and providing that the boundaries of the City of Juliaetta shall be altered and that the land described in section 1 of this ordinance and generally shown on Exhibit A, attached hereto and incorporated by this reference, shall be excluded from the territory of the City of Juliaetta, requiring the Juliaetta City Clerk to record and file this ordinance, a legal description of the land to be excluded, and a map of the altered boundaries of the City of Juliaetta as required by law, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing that this ordinance shall be in full force and effect upon its passage, approval, and publication according to law.
So I'll make the motion to accept ordinance 2021-02.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
We have to have a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Whitney?
Yes.
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 Passes.
How long does that be posted for? That has to be posted,
I have to publish the ordinance, so I will.
was that like a 30-day or what is that? I'm trying to coordinate with my surveyor.
I think as soon as it's published, you're good.
Okay.
I can check with the attorney to double check them.
Okay.
If there's an amount of time before that changes.
All right. It's okay to proceed though with having the maps made now, correct? Right, because he's going to redo the city map or the survey and everything. Terry Boller. Yeah, he did all the original work, so it's all on his computer, so it's really smooth for him.
Mark, we have ordered the signs and the light for down there.
Okay.
So it's all in motion. Whenever we receive it, well, then we can move forward.
All right, first, that's a big step. There is an unreasonable amount of trash generated down there daily. So,
I try to pick up every day.
The
So-
the only other thing that we can do is to take the recycle bins out. Dick goes down regularly and pulls trash out of the bins and picks up the trash from around the bins, but people just
He's not
are
required to do
jerks.
it or
He's
anything,
not, he
and
does it.
eventually, if he doesn't do it, and they see that, they're just gonna take the bins away from us, and we won't have any, so.
I don't deny at all that Dick does that. In fact, that was my first thing I said last time I met. The question is that enough? I mean, and at some point, it isn't, you know. Obviously, you guys made a decision, I respect that, we move forward with that. But it doesn't mean that it's not gonna be, that's gonna resolve it, but I'll assume it might.
Yeah.
Well, we did also talk about like some game cameras so that we can get some evidence to turn over to the sheriff's department in hopes that they can issue citations and stuff like that as well, to hopefully
Right.
resolve the other issues that are going on other than just the trash.
Well, I appreciate that, the city has not ignored this. I've said, you know, the customer service is excellent from the city employees, that's not at all the issue. The question comes, is that enough to resolve the trash issue? You made a decision, I respect that, we'll move forward from there, but I'm not saying that that is for sure gonna resolve it,
Yeah.
realistically. And I appreciate your efforts, man.
When you say trash, is it just like,
Garbage.
Garbage.
like people just throwing it down there?
So
or-
to clarify, and again, not demeaning the effort of the mayor or anyone else, but we're talking about trash that is around the periphery, it's around the, it's in the grass, it is there constantly, it's on both sides of the trail, it's in the creek, if you walk down Sherman Lane, you can see it in the creek. There's trash in the tree, the mayor was aware of it, he did not ignore it, in fact, the tree came down, but that's just a realistic reality of it.
Yeah, no, we're not asking, I was wondering, is it more like, are people, when they're putting stuff in there, is it just being sloppy and it's getting somewhere?
I think it's both.
Or it's both,
It's
yeah.
both, because there was large pieces of chunk of something that looked like styrofoam in the tree, and that matched the same chunks that were in the river also.
Nice, okay, yeah, so I was wondering.
People put their trash, they shove it into the recycle bins, plastic and styrofoam, the
They
things
put-
that should not be there.
It's like they don't wanna use
Maybe the
their
words aren't big
garbage
enough.
bins at home, or they're full, so they take them down and recycle and just leave them there.
Yeah, I think, if Mark's good with that, I appreciate your kind words for the mayor and the city that,
Absolutely.
you know, we'll see how the signs and the lights go. I know nothing ever, goes best with the government, but then if that doesn't pick up, then maybe we do use some of that expenditure money that apparently I haven't, look at some kind of camera or, something like that, so.
I appreciate it.
That sounds reasonable. Fair.
I appreciate it. Like I said, I respect your decision, and that's the right, you want to give it a try.
Okay. We'll try and see. Guess they're not gonna read the signs on the side of the. We'll give it a try and see what happens.
I appreciate it.
Smart.
Now we have the council move an approval to amendment for the owner of engineer agreement with Keller Associates for the Juliaetta wastewater facility plan study. Council consider to allow the mayor to sign the papers.
So we received this amendment from Keller Associates, and it's fairly self-explanatory. We did, Dick and I and Jeff and Bonnie, we talked to Stillman just to figure out why it went from 60,000 to 660,241, and nothing additional, nothing new, I mean, was added. It was, the 60,000 was the planning phase, and the extra was the design phase added into the existing contract. So just putting it all into this one contract we already had, rather than having a new contract to put this design phase in. So nothing new, not a surprise. It's all stuff that you knew about. He said that Howard from USDA also wanted to add in the bidding and construction phase costs to that too at some point, but he wasn't sure if that is how that was going to happen with another amendment, or if it would be another contract. But anyway, we were curious, so we wanted to let you know what this was about so you could make a informed decision. He said that, well, he also noted that we're in a good position for CDBG grant funds. That's moving forward as well, but we don't have any final answers there yet.
Guess since I've said it on a phone call, make a motion to accept the amendment number 1 for that amount for Keller and Associates. Or at least the mayor to sign for that.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Passes. Okay, we need the personnel property or policy.
typed in all the changes that everyone had talked about over the last, however long that was, so those are all in there. You guys mentioned that you might want to have the attorney look at it before you go ahead and adopt it. So I guess if everything looks good to you, then you can tell me to send it to the attorney and I shall. Okay.
I looked over it the other day and everything seemed to be,
Yeah. I looked at
Yeah, it seems to be, a pretty good policy that, the main thing is for, I think the employees, I hope they too read it. Did you read it?
No.
No, sir. You haven't read it.
I
Well,
can
it
get it
looks
to the
like to me-
employees before we send it to the attorney, if you would prefer. Just so that everybody has a say, if that's what you're after.
It looked like to me a very good
I thought it did.
Yeah, that
policy.
looked good.
So it's,
I just thought it was nice to get it updated, you know, it's on yellow paper, typed.
well, I move that have Josh and Justin read it and make sure they're good with it. And if they're good with it, go ahead and send it to the attorney for final review, or from the attorney.
I'll second.
all in favor? Passes. Justin, what have you got?
Oh, I don't really have anything this month. I sent my eyeball license off last Friday, so I'm in touch with wastewater too. And maybe just a little on the garbage. I know that, because Josh and I actually patrol, and Dick always patrols, but it's not just, it's, if you've come out of Lewiston lately, it looks like the 1970s when I was little. There is garbage everywhere on both sides. And Juliaetta would be the same way down here by the bike path, and especially at the other end of town by the water plant. But there's just, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why people are not taking care of their garbage like they used to.
May I say something fast?
Yeah.
I have noticed that Lake Tahoe Sanitation does not secure their loads. And it blows out the top. And if you drive between Juliet and Kinder, it gets up on the hills, it's in the ditches.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Good, that's fine. I just want to say that.
Something that citizens can do is call up there, tell them,
Yeah.
call Amanda, because that is a fine.
They know
And I used to be a garbage man. If you don't look back, you don't see anything blow out. Tell me I'm wrong. People driving their loads down to the bulky waste site, same way. What I'm saying is we gotta get to make sure that the new owner is aware of it, and Amanda's aware of it, because he seems to run a little tighter ship than his dad did.
Okay.
And that would be a good place to start, and, definitely let them know what, because we only have so many roll-off trucks, so just let them know what color it is, and they can know which one it is.
Okay.
And that will help speed the process along.
I can attest to what you're saying about, I forget his name, but the boy who's running.
Brandon.
Yeah, like he's tightening a lot of stuff up.
Yeah, he's made a lot of good changes and tightened a lot of things up since he took over from his dad.
So all that to say, I do think he would take that type of a complaint or a report very seriously.
I agree. So as anybody who sees it, including any counselors or whatever, just call them up, get the word out. Let Amanda know too, because she's mean when it comes to stuff like that.
Well, rabbit dog.
Yeah.
I guess what I was trying to say is we're kind of all aware of the garbage situation, and so maybe we can all work together to get our arms around it. But other than that, I don't really have anything else, I don't think.
I pick up along the trail on the ground, wherever
I
I
don't,
can pick it up.
it just
Some
blows around.
I
Some
wonder,
days the garbage, my gator is clear full of stuff that I pull out of the bins and pick up.
Well, we're gonna do the straight stretch. The Blackberry Committee is doing that on March 14th, it's a Sunday. It's coming out in the newsletter. Anybody in town can volunteer to help that's interested, and it's social distancing friendly. And all the bags are provided and everything. But even we noticed as a committee together, it's like, holy cow, what's going on?
It's a lot.
Because it just seems like it's a lot all of a sudden.
Well, you got old, decrepit, elderly people like me on it, you know? It ain't easy to get up and down that road.
And it multiplies every Wednesday.
You know, like I don't know if it's around, but maybe something to look at too. I mean, there's always seems to be like kids groups or something that need some volunteer hours or, you know, community thing. Maybe if somebody could think of those here locally that we could, you know, organize some kind of trash pickup thing where I mean a lot of, you know, like Boy Scouts and things usually have that some kind of a.
Sadly, there are no Boy Scout groups around here right now, so.
Right, that's what I was kind of, yeah, like, but if there's something else that we think
Might
of.
consider talking to the local churches, youth groups, that type of thing.
Yeah, so, somebody think of that, maybe it might be something else we could look at too.
Mhm.
If you consider the amount that the mayor does put into it, and then it's still there, again, I want to go with the city's plan here, but to be realistic, it's a lot of trash.
I just don't think that it matters where we put the bins, it's not gonna get any better.
No, I think so.
It doesn't matter where the
People are
bins
just
are.
sloppy.
Kind of sad spot, because all the, you know, everybody that comes down to use the bike path too.
And the
You
creek
know,
is
that's
right
what they
there.
see our town as is,
And the creek is right there.
I know, some of you can't help.
And it's going into the creek, it definitely for sure is.
Well, I try to pick up around town, the trail. I try to make a circle around town every day and make a trip.
Well, and once we start mowing, then we'll actually pick up every time we mow, we pick up, because we have to, because no one.
Justin and I both, Justin goes out and picks up tons of trash. Starts at one end, and by the time you get down to the other end of town,
Yeah.
it's already started again.
Mhm.
It just happens every Wednesday. All that trash blows up
Oh,
a
like
good
a
percentage
snow
of it.
blower out the top, as soon as they dump it in, it's all coming
Yeah.
out down our road.
I don't know how many packaging peanuts I picked up today. It's just, the amount of styrofoam that we picked up today
Yeah.
was pretty staggering.
Imagine what it'll be tomorrow when it's actually Wednesday.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be
All
just
over again.
all over again.
Yeah, there is rules that we're supposed to follow as customers, but with those new trucks, when the wind blows, you don't follow those rules. Yeah, I'm glad that I don't do it anymore, I have to deal with that.
I know, I think it was a couple months ago, we had something in, I don't know if it's worthwhile, but in the newsletter, I think you put something about reminding people that they're not supposed to put loose stuff in the bins. I don't know if it's worth doing again. So maybe we put, hey, we don't do that.
Yeah, also,
Like, gets into the creek, like Mark's saying, like, maybe not just make it a
Well,
message, like it's.
and put in there also maybe about bagging any loose trash in the cans themselves. Because that's where most of the stuff coming out of the truck is from, is loose trash. When that big arm goes up and the wind's blowing, it catches it and it just cycles it all out.
That's
So not everybody orders stuff from Amazon,
Yeah, oh yeah.
and it comes with packaging peanuts, and there's people, a couple people I can think of that do businesses from homes that get tons of packages
Oh, yeah.
weekly, and their trash can is full of loose packaging peanuts.
Yeah, so if we put that in the newsletter, please bag your trash before putting it in the receptacle. Also with the loose stuff and no garbage at the recycling. Please try and educate people as best as possible.
I'll do it.
Josh, do you want it?
Albright wrapped up their installation of the riprap and rock down there at the water plant, to get rid of that back eddy. I think we talked about it last meeting, but we got our new hydrant in, and makes Mike very happy. I've been in contact with the aerial guys that were doing the fiber optics, that decided to
Tear everything up.
they just tear everything up and cut trees and just drop it where they didn't pick a single branch up. So they have, I was reassured today that they are working on that, that they came out and cleaned
That's
it
not
up.
TDS, Kathy, it's a different company.
They're all the same.
Well, actually, I don't think, well, TDS is underground, this is.
Yeah, this is Spectre.
Spectrum or.
They cut my trees, they cut my trees, didn't care.
Yeah. So they said they came out and they picked some up. I went and saw some down by Mark's today. There's a pretty good pile there. So I'm gonna go back around and follow them, make sure that they did do what they said they were gonna do, so. I believe that's all I have.
How about you, Mike?
We don't have anything.
Jeff?
No, sir.
I'd like to thank, how do you pronounce your last name?
Mallory.
Thank you for coming to our meeting.
Oh, I got told to be here.
No.
Thanks for calling over.
Thanks for calling over.
That was me.
And also, we only have 4 strands left at the park, 3 or 4 strands to get out of the trees. I'm just waiting for some assistance to get them out of the trees. I can't reach them. And thank Dick for taking down all the lights that he took down for me. For us, I should say. Greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I can reach him.
I was standing on a ladder and couldn't reach them. And looking forward to next year, and hopefully it'll be as good as it was this year.
Yeah, it was nice this year.
We got a lot of compliments.
I do want to say that, the people that live in, Randy Burns' old house, the Brunses, she called the other day when Josh was there, she called and said she wanted to thank the city for putting up the lights. They thought it was amazing this year, and I just forgot to tell everybody that she wanted to thank everybody for doing it. So.
It turned out really good this year.
Sarah and Justin.
Sarah, yeah. Her husband's a teacher, right?
No?
Didn't he teach at Troy?
No?
Oh, you're thinking of Jen, you're thinking of Jen.
Yeah, Bruns, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's down there.
Okay. Matt Brown.
Not Jen,
Yeah,
yeah, she's fishing game,
Oh, okay.
How about you?
Yes, thank you for coming. I actually, Richie asked me a long time ago just to remind him, and I haven't lately, and today I happened to remind you. So that's why you were summoned here today, so thank you. I'm not at nothing.
How about you, Vicky?
The only thing I have is, I like that the patrols are sitting, I work at the school, elementary school, and I like that whoever patrols sits there sometimes in the mornings or afternoons or something, because there's some little red car that's going like a bat out of you know where, up and down the street, and those kids, they don't care whether they're looking for a car, they run down to get the balls, or whatever, and he's going really way too fast.
We've been trying to get it, you're not the first one to bring that to our attention.
Yeah.
We're aware of it, we're working on it.
Yeah. He's going really fast.
Hide in the corner.
That's all I have.
How about you, Vicky?
Is there anything else you would like to see in the newsletter, since I do have to send that in this week? I've got the note about the bagged garbage and the garbage at the recycling bins. We'll talk about that there's the thing at the bulky waste site where you can bring your household garbage, the cleanup day. Those are coming in April. Anything else that?
Do you want to say anything about the radar signs?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
I could do that.
Also,
We got approval, we got those up.
also a reminder that their school zones are on both sides of the school, you know, on the back side as well.
On Third.
On Third, yes, they come screaming by my house quite a bit. You know, as the weather starts to warm, kids are gonna be more outside, and the drivers need to be aware of them.
How about the Blackberry Committee's cleanup day?
I already got hold of Polly and she's gonna put it in. It's 10 o'clock at the park, we're meeting at 10 o'clock at the park,
When was that, Justin?
March 14th. It's a Sunday,
March?
yeah. If we wait too late, well, everybody's afraid of snakes. And we don't want to do it when it's still snowing and cold, so I don't know.
I don't have any